Human survival is a concept we often take for granted. We believe that with enough strength, intelligence, or luck, we can make it through almost anything. But sometimes, survival stories don't just defy odds, they defy reason. They challenge what we believe is possible. In today's video, you're about to witness accounts of people who survived events so catastrophic, so horrifying, that they should have been impossible to walk away from. Yet, somehow, they did. From being buried alive for days to enduring the freezing vacuum of space, these survivors didn't just escape death. They stared it in the face and lived to tell the tale. Some had to amputate their own limbs. Others endured weeks without food, surrounded by the bodies of those who didn't make it. Each story is a chilling testament to human willpower, desperation, and sheer luck. What makes these stories even more remarkable is that many happened in the most remote, isolated, or unexpected settings. Some victims were left alone in the wilderness. Others were in the heart of modern cities. Regardless of where they were, they all had one thing in common: they survived when no one thought they could. Their accounts have become legends, studied by scientists, investigators, and filmmakers who can't understand how they're still alive. Stay with us until the end to hear a survival story so bizarre it left doctors and investigators baffled for years. These are real people. Real horrors. Real survival. Now, let's begin our countdown of the 10 most unbelievable survival stories ever recorded. Aaron Ralston. Trapped in a canyon in 2003, experienced hiker Aaron Ralston ventured into Utah's Blue John Canyon without telling anyone. While navigating the narrow rock formations, a boulder dislodged and pinned his right arm against the canyon wall. Completely trapped, Ralston had no phone, no way to call for help, and very little food or water. He was entirely alone. For 5 excruciating days, he tried everything to free himself. He rationed water, carved messages into the rock, and even filmed goodbye videos to his family. But as dehydration and exhaustion set in, he realized the only way to survive was to amputate his own arm. Using a dull multi-tool, he broke the bones in his arm and sawed through flesh and tendons. After freeing himself, Aaron rappelled down a 65-foot cliff and hiked several miles until he encountered a family who called for help. Against all logic, he made it out alive. His story became the basis for the film 127 Hours, but even that couldn't capture the true horror of what he endured. Aaron didn't just survive the canyon, he escaped certain death with nothing but raw determination. Julianne Kopka fell from the sky on Christmas Eve 1971. 17-year-old Julianne Kopka boarded Lanza Flight 508 with her mother. As the plane flew over the Peruvian rainforest, it was struck by lightning and broke apart mid-air. Julianne, still strapped to her seat, plummeted 2 miles to the ground, and survived. She woke up alone in the jungle, injured and disoriented. With a broken collarbone, deep cuts, and one eye swollen shut, she had to rely on the survival skills her parents, both zoologists, had taught her. She followed a stream for 10 days, drinking water and avoiding predators. Maggots infested her wounds, and she had no food. Eventually, she stumbled upon a hut and was rescued by loggers. Doctors were stunned that she survived both the fall and the brutal jungle. Everyone else on the flight had perished. Julianne's story remains one of the most unbelievable aviation survival tales of all time. Her survival was equal parts luck, instinct, and unrelenting perseverance. Joe Simpson. Left for dead in the Andes, climber Joe Simpson and his partner Simon Yates were descending the Silla Grande in the Peruvian Andes in 1985. Joe broke his leg during the descent, a devastating injury at high altitude. As Simon tried to lower Joe down with ropes, a storm hit. At one point, Joe fell into a crevasse, and Simon, believing Joe had died, was forced to cut the rope to save himself. But Joe wasn't dead. With a shattered leg, he crawled through the glacier, surviving on melted snow and sheer willpower. Over 3 days, he dragged himself back to base camp, hallucinating and starving. By the time he returned, Simon was preparing to leave, believing Joe was gone forever. Joe's incredible story was later chronicled in the book and documentary Touching the Void. His survival is still considered one of the greatest feats of endurance in mountaineering history. What saved Joe wasn't just skill, it was an almost inhuman refusal to die. Roy Sullivan. Struck by lightning. 7 times Roy Sullivan, a park ranger in Virginia, holds a bizarre and terrifying record. He was struck by lightning 7 times, and survived every single one. His first strike happened in 1942, setting his leg on fire. The next 6 followed over the years, each with horrifying effects: burns, loss of consciousness, and permanent injuries. Scientists studied him extensively but found no medical explanation for his apparent magnetism to lightning. His colleagues called him the human lightning rod. What makes this story even more eerie is that Roy never saw danger. He was a calm, humble man who happened to attract nature's most lethal weapon. His final strike occurred in 1977, after which he retired. Tragically, he took his own life in 1983, not from lightning, but from heartbreak. Roy Sullivan's story is a reminder that survival sometimes doesn't mean the end of suffering. But for decades, he survived what should have been fatal many times over. Harrison Okene. Survived at the bottom of the ocean in 2013, Harrison Okene, a Nigerian cook, was trapped inside a capsized tugboat at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. The boat sank 100 feet below the surface, with all crew presumed dead. But Harrison found an air pocket and managed to stay alive, in total darkness, for 60 hours. Surrounded by the bodies of his crewmates and cold seawater, he used a mattress to stay above the waterline. He had no food, no light, and believed he was going to die. Meanwhile, a dive team arrived to recover bodies, and to their shock, found Harrison still alive. The footage of his rescue is haunting. He reached out from the shadows, and the diver nearly panicked. Experts said his survival was a miracle. The carbon dioxide levels, hypothermia risk, and mental strain should have killed him. But Harrison Okene survived at the bottom of the sea longer than any human ever recorded. Vesna Vulovic. Survived a 33,000-foot fall in 1972. Vesna Vulovic, a 22-year-old flight attendant from Yugoslavia, became the sole survivor of a plane explosion that occurred at 33,000 feet. A bomb planted on the aircraft caused it to break apart mid-air. Everyone on board was presumed dead, except Vesna, who was found alive in the wreckage by a villager. Her survival was deemed physically impossible. She had suffered multiple broken bones, including her skull, legs, and vertebrae. She was in a coma for days and was paralyzed temporarily. Yet, after months of recovery, Vesna regained the ability to walk. Doctors believed that being pinned by a food cart in the tail section of the plane helped absorb the impact, and the snow-covered terrain softened her fall. But the truth is, no one can fully explain how she lived through such a fall. Vesna holds the Guinness World Record for the highest fall survived without a parachute, a record that stands to this day. Her story is one of the most incredible aviation survivals ever documented. Beck Weathers. Frozen and left for dead on Everest during the tragic 1996 Everest expedition, Beck Weathers found himself stranded during a deadly storm just below the summit. After losing his sight due to a pre-existing condition, he was forced to stop and wait for help. Temperatures dropped to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. He was later declared dead by rescuers and left behind. But somehow, Beck didn't die. After spending more than 18 hours in the freezing cold, with his face and hands frozen solid, he woke up and staggered back to camp. His arrival shocked everyone. They couldn't believe he was still breathing. He was airlifted off the mountain and underwent multiple amputations. He lost parts of both hands, his nose, and toes. Yet, he not only lived, he recovered, returned to work, and wrote a memoir titled Left for Dead. Beck's story is one of mental resilience and extreme physical endurance in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Anatoly Bugorsky. The man who survived a particle accelerator in 1978, Soviet physicist Anatoly Bugorsky was working on a particle accelerator when a safety mechanism failed. He leaned into the equipment at the precise moment a beam of protons, traveling at nearly the speed of light, shot through his skull. The beam entered behind his left ear and exited near his nose. He saw a flash, brighter than 1,000 suns, but felt no pain. The left side of his face swelled massively, and doctors expected he would die within days from radiation exposure. But Anatoly didn't die. Though the beam damaged his facial nerves and left him partially paralyzed, he recovered and completed his PhD. He even returned to scientific work. His survival remains one of the strangest in science history. He was hit by a particle beam with energy levels that should have been instantly fatal, yet he lived. Frane Selic, the world's luckiest unlucky man. Frane Selic, a Croatian music teacher, is often called the world's luckiest man, or perhaps the unluckiest. His survival story spans decades, beginning in 1962 when he was thrown from a derailed train into a river and survived. A year later, he was sucked out of a plane door mid-flight and landed in a haystack. The plane crashed, killing 19. But it didn't stop there. Over the next few years, Frane survived several car crashes, a bus accident, and being hit by a truck. In one instance, his car exploded just after he escaped. After surviving 7 deadly incidents, he won the lottery in 2003. He later gave most of the winnings away, saying he was finally done with tempting fate. Frane's life sounds like fiction, but news reports and witnesses confirm many of his claims. Whether miraculous or simply absurd, his life story is one of the most surreal survival records in modern times. Albert Stevens survived the highest radiation dose ever. Albert Stevens, a house painter in the 1940s, unknowingly became part of a secret U.S. government experiment. Diagnosed with stomach cancer, he was injected with plutonium without his knowledge as part of the Manhattan Project's early radiation tests. What scientists didn't expect was that Stevens didn't have cancer at all, and he would survive for 20 more years. During that time, his body retained the highest known dose of internal radiation of any human in history, over 600 times the safe limit. He never showed symptoms related to radiation poisoning and lived to the age of 79. His case became public decades later, igniting outrage and ethical debates about human experimentation. Albert Stevens' survival is a tragic but astonishing medical anomaly. He lived through something that should have been lethal, and never even knew it was happening. Each of these stories pushes the boundaries of what we think the human body and spirit can endure. They survived events that should have been absolute death sentences. Science can explain some of it. But in many cases, we're left with more questions than answers. Survival isn't always about strength or preparation. Sometimes it's about luck. Sometimes it's about an impossible will to live. And sometimes it's about being in the wrong place at the right time, and somehow making it out. These people weren't superheroes. They were just like us, teachers, hikers, scientists, travelers. What happened to them could have happened to anyone. But somehow, they made it out. Their stories remind us that even in the darkest, most hopeless moments, survival is possible. If this video left you speechless, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who won't believe it's real. And in the comments, tell us, which survival shocked you the most, and would you have made it out alive?